on rebuilding your volunteer workforce. Tonight it's hosted by myself, Ashley Ryan, the event volunteer officer at Scottish Cycling, supported by Morven, our events manager, who's in place for the next year. We are recording this, so it will go on YouTube later in the week. So don't worry if you drop out or miss anything, it will be up for you to review if you like. And you can share with other organisers that couldn't make it tonight as well. So tonight I'm going to kind of cover three areas. How has COVID impacted volunteering in general? How has it impacted your volunteer pool in cycling? And then what actions should we take to rebuild our volunteer workforce? We're scheduled in for about 60 minutes, but we might not take that long, depends how much chat you've all got. But I really do encourage you to chat, use the chat function, and we're going to be in breakout rooms a couple of times as well. So please do engage with each other. I don't know all the answers. I don't think anybody does. So really share your learning and ideas, and we'll see where we get to at the end of the night. So to start with, how has COVID impacted volunteering in general? So Volunteer Scotland have done a really good study during the pandemic, and they discovered that during the first lockdown, about 3/4 of the Scottish population was volunteering. And that's a really exciting positive statistic, that many people decided to use their spare time to volunteer. Given that, you know, they might have had more spare time than usual, a lot of us were furloughed, a lot of us wouldn't have had the same commute as previously, but it's really a positive outcome of Corona that a lot of people did choose to volunteer. And as you can imagine, a lot of that volunteering activity was around things like befriending, helping people doing their shopping, and a lot of community activity like that. But on a usual year, the last time Volunteer Scotland did research like this, the volunteering rate was down at 48%. So that's a huge leap in people volunteering. The other positive outcome from this study was they think that more people are actually going to stay volunteering after the pandemic. So the total volunteering will go from that 48% up to 59%. So not quite up to the same level as 74%, but a lot of us will have gone back to our jobs and have less disposable time with other commitments, getting back to normal. But for us, they think that formal volunteering, that's like volunteering through a charity or a club or an event, it's going to go up about 11%. So that's a whole new group of people that could possibly be captured into sporting events to be part of our volunteer workforce. So the third thing that I thought was really worth sharing with you all from that study is that compared to before the pandemic, once the crisis is over, once things get back to normal, in general, most people say they're going to keep volunteering about the same amount. A few are thinking about donating a little bit more of their time, but the vast majority, you can see there, 62%, think that they'll probably keep volunteering about the same amount of time. So I think the real take-home message from this study from Volunteer Scotland is that it's not necessarily getting more out of the people who already volunteer, but it's tapping into those new people that have experienced volunteering possibly for the first time, and how do we attract them to our events. So after the presentation, probably tomorrow, I'll email you all out a lot of details of the whole presentation, but also details so you can look at the Volunteer Scotland study as a whole and see a little bit more information about that, because it was quite interesting. So what we're really here for, getting into your volunteer at your events. So I thought it best at this, just initially, if you could in the chat section share with us these three things. Are you currently trying to recruit volunteers for your event? If not, when do you think you'll be doing that? How is that experience differing from pre-pandemic, and how is it similar? because I don't know myself. So I would like to hear what you guys are thinking out there on the ground, actively trying to do this. So we'll do that for a couple of minutes, and then we'll kind of collate our thoughts and see where we are. Everybody who was going to feedback has. Yeah, so I think there's some good points there. Asking, who's going to come back? Will those regular people come back who we did have as our volunteers week in, week out? How scared and vulnerable are people feeling? And Martin was saying there that he's just following the same kind of process as he would usually to recruit his volunteers. So going back to basics a little bit here, but going forward, obviously the first thing you always do when you're looking at your event is determine what volunteers are your absolute must-haves, and those that are really critical to your event delivery, those to do with the safety of event, for example. And then you've got those roles that are the nice to haves, the ones that can give the event that extra added sparkle, whether it's a volunteer photographer or somebody who will post on social media for you throughout your race. So the first thing we're going to do in our breakout rooms, really simple, easy task, just to wake up your brain cells and think about your event again, because a lot of you, your event, last time you ran an event will have been a few years ago potentially, and some of you may not have ran an event yourself before. So we're going to go into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. And I think most of us are going to focus on those volunteers that you think you're absolutely going to need at your event if you run one this year. And if you have time, you can talk a little bit about those wants. So we're going to take those 10 minutes, and then if one person from the group can volunteer to feedback 2 or 3 key points that you make in your discussions, that would be really, really helpful. So Morven, would you, from my room, like to share what we were talking about? Anybody?
As long as you don't get killed in the rush.
I know they're a big rush, everybody.
I think it's a good idea generally for all event organisers just to take a step back, saying, right, what roles and responsibilities do we need to have to make sure we can run a safe and fair event? And there's probably instances in the past where we've had far more people as an event than you actually need, but it's always nice to have those extra bods. And looking where we can for people to double up. Is there a role where they can do first thing in the morning, but then they're available something in the afternoon? So like handing out numbers at registration, whatever process you use for registration, handing out the numbers, and then being used for another role once the registration is complete and everyone's there. COVID office is the main difference, because that's an extra bod that you need that we haven't needed prior.
Yeah.
What else was there, Ashley?
Oh, your McDonald's drive-through. I think everybody would like to hear about that.
It's just the process we're going to use at Caird Park for when they're coming through. There's now a main gate or access to the car park, and the riders will be instructed that they'll need to display the number in the window as they come in, and then they'll just be handed a pack with the race number, pins, and a timing chip through the window. So there's no contract. They don't need to sign on anymore. Or currently for BC are happy that by pre-registering for an event, you are accepting the terms and conditions of British Cycling. So they're happy for you to do that from the registration point of view. So that's one way of minimising contact.
Yeah, so your need for your sign-on volunteers isn't quite the same. You don't need 2 people sitting behind the desk, taking licenses, getting people to sign the sheet and handing over the numbers. You've now got your process where people are coming into the car park, receiving their numbers and moving on. And those people that are doing that can then, I think you're suggesting they'll probably be holders during the event.
And the other thing as well is maybe to look for those volunteers from parents of competitors. So that's 2 less people you're expecting on site, because you're not expecting no one associated with riders to come onto the site.
Yeah. Would anybody in the other group like to share anything that they discussed?
Yeah, we were kind of the same sort of thing. It was back to basics and no frills, just who we definitely need. So my event's a time trial, so it was just the marshals, timekeeper, some possibly maybe need somebody for keeping people apart more, depending on what the regulations are at the time. The separate sign-on, I didn't realise that about not requiring a sign-on, but I had thought about having nobody there, but just to have all the numbers and everything laid out and being able to pick up at the point. And the COVID officer, and obviously with the at the moment we wouldn't have any header upper or anything like that, so they would just clip on as they start off for the timekeeper. And then Tom mentioned with his he's got another area for his when he's doing his events. He needs a staging area, so he has to consider about what his announcers are going to do and be able to get people from one area to another, and make sure that the right people are in the right place and keeping separate. So it's maybe a bit trickier for him. Martin's going to say something.
As you can say, Colin, one of the things we'd considered for the cyclocrosses I was looking at running in pre-Christmas and for the track event coming up was that the chief commissaire would do a video briefing. So most of the briefing will be done prior to the event.
Okay.
There's less hanging around. As Tom probably knows, how many of the riders actually listen to what you say anyway, without coming back with questions.
Yeah, no, that sounds like you had an interesting chat in your room as well, Colin.
Yeah, I think that was everything. So yeah, just about the COVID stuff, just taking everything back to basics, and getting an event on. And I think the riders would appreciate that anyway. We're not going to have any fancy medals or anything like that at the end of it, or yeah, see where we are with the bun fight afterwards. But I doubt it.
Yeah. I suppose something you said earlier is a good opportunity to just evaluate what you're doing anyway, because a lot of events you might have been doing them for 5 years and you've had X number of volunteers doing that, but this gives us a chance to really look at it and evaluate it, and do you need that many, and how could we do things maybe a little bit different? What things are we doing to stop the spread of coronavirus at the moment that actually will probably just keep on in the future, because it does streamline things a bit. Maybe not the packed through the windows of the cars, but some of the other things perhaps.
The other thing for time trials, Colin, to consider is actually using your chip timing system as a provisional of results, because then you've got live race information. That's one of the things I actually forgot to say, that with the MyLap system, you can have the results and championships running in the background, so you do not have to have a results posted. You point people towards the app. That's where the information is going to be available for current standings, and you're just using technology that's there.
Yeah, not having people gathering around a printed sheet. Yeah. Right. I'm going to move on because that's nearly 7:30 already. So I would move on when I ask it to. There we go. So the important stuff at the moment, the COVID guidelines. So depending when you host your event.
Actually, you're not screen sharing at the moment.
Oh, is it because I was chatting? Probably.
It's lovely to get to see everyone's faces. Mostly to see the cat, if I'm honest. Yes, that's where I'm at. Oh, that's a cracking cat, Villis.
Oh yeah.
That scores high points, that cat.
Right, are we back?
You're back, you're on, and we've got 2 cats present and correct.
Brilliant, always welcome. Okay, so COVID guidelines, all the jazzy stuff that we look forward to, our government announcements whenever we see that they're coming. So depending on when your event is, these could be so vastly different. We're All going well, all the events are coming back on from the 26th of this month, which we are so excited about. So we should be able to confirm even further information the week before. But who knows what will be happening in June, who knows what will be happening in September. So do read the current guidelines that we put up on our website. We do post them out to you via our newsletter and reminders on social media as well. So it shouldn't be too difficult for you to find. Once you've read them, if you've still got queries and things, please do get in touch with us. We're here to help. It's always best to send us an email and we'll get back to you. So either in tandem or once you've done that need and want exercise, you'd probably do want to reevaluate things depending on what those guidelines are. By the time your event comes around, maybe you will be able to have that local hall open and have a physical sign on back on where people can gather and have their cakes afterwards, but maybe not, maybe it is just going to be online. And adapt and innovate where possible. Martin's shared one way that they're being innovative, having their car park drive-through for their race packs. But I'm sure there's other things people will be coming up with on the way, and we'll try and share them as we find them out. Pre-recording or having the commissaires do their briefing the night before is another way that people have been avoiding that gathering at events. So moving on to rebuilding. So obviously your first port of call is to contact the pool of volunteers that you've involved in previous years. You need to find out, has that pool of people reduced? You don't know until you ask. We can assume that some people aren't going to be comfortable coming back, but you never know. A lot of people might be more excited than you thought. We might have lost people in other ways. And there's always naturally people moving away and changing jobs and things that make them less available. So you need to find out what the state of play is and not make any assumptions. So how are you going to find that out? Are you just going to send out a generic group email to everybody, to your club, to the list of previous volunteers? Are you going to send out a survey for people to complete, or are you going to tailor it to individuals and get in touch with people one-on-one with personal emails or phone calls? All depends on you, your time that you've got available, and how well you know your volunteers. And I think the last point is quite important. If people are declining, are you going to ask them why if they don't tell you why they're not wanting to continue to volunteer at your event? Is it a no, I'm not going to volunteer at your event this year? Or is it a no, I'm not going to volunteer at your event again because of X, Y, and Z? It's easy to assume that it is because of COVID, but it might be something else. It might be, no, sorry, I'm not going to volunteer anymore because I've actually, during lockdown, I've become a befriender and I'm really enjoying it, and it really excites me being able to keep in touch with the elderly, more isolated people. So sorry, I don't have any more time to help at your event. And that's fine, now you know. But it could be something you could fix. For example, if it's that they're worried because they're usually the sign-on volunteer and they're really concerned about handling those licenses and handing over those numbers, it's just a case perhaps of clarifying what the process is for sign-on, and that actually no, there's not going to be a sign-on in the same way, and you would be doing, for example, passing packs through people's car windows. And that person might say, oh, actually, I can do that, and yeah, I'll commit to helping you again this year because I actually feel quite confident that you're doing this in a safe way. But you don't know if you don't ask. It's a balance. You want to ask, you want to find out, but you don't want to be intrusive and push people's buttons. So I'll leave that to your judgment, which is easy for me to say on this side of the computer. So new volunteers. Back to those first slides that I showed you from Volunteer Scotland, showing us that potentially there's an 11% increase in people volunteering formally in Scotland through charities, through clubs, and through events. So how can we capture some of those people to our cycling events? If they volunteered during the first lockdown, they might have been doing something like helping their neighbour do their shopping, befriending, or walking people's dogs that couldn't go out during lockdown. So they've enjoyed volunteering, they've maybe got the bug for it. So how do we attract them to cycling above everything else? And how do we get in touch with these people, because they're not part of our circle of influence? So the first thing I'd suggest is looking at some of these local council websites. Most councils seem to have a volunteering or a third sector site where you can advertise opportunities. Some of them are easier to use than others, I'm not going to lie. And some of them have requirements of you to be eligible to post things on their page. For example, maybe the Volunteer Aberdeen one says that your event has to be in Aberdeenshire. You know, I'd understand that. Other things might be that they want you to have a volunteer policy, which if you're a charity, you're very, very likely to have a volunteer policy. But as an event that only happens once a year, it's quite unlikely that you're going to have a volunteer policy. But luckily, a lot of them also have templates, so you can just adjust the template and submit that, and hopefully be able to advertise your opportunity on these sites. The next thing you think about is, how are you going to showcase these opportunities to new people? You know what you need. You need 20 marshals to do your downhill course safely. So how are you going to advertise that and market it to people? Are you going to say, need a marshal for 3 hours in the afternoon to hold a red flag outside? Doesn't sound that exciting. I don't know if that would capture my imagination. It might make me imagine standing in the rain in Scotland, but it might be a beautiful day. But to make it more attractive to people, you maybe give them a hook and show them what they get out of it. For example, you might want to say something like, build your team working skills, be a vital part of the safety of an event, and help people get active. Help our event become a marshal for an afternoon. So you're getting everything there. You're getting what they're getting out of it. They're getting building team working skills. They're helping the safety of event. They're getting something warm and fuzzy about it. They are helping people get active. And then it's very clear what your expectations are. You're becoming a marshal and we need you for an afternoon. Not going to say this is going to guarantee that more people are going to volunteer at your event, but you're setting out those clear expectations, and that can only help you get the right people to volunteer at your event. And the last point there on that slide that's really important is, how are you going to train these new people that are getting involved, especially if they have never been to a cycling event before? Some roles might not need much training at all, but I know as a volunteer myself, if you don't know what you're going into, you do have that bit of anxiety. And if I've got anxiety, I'm maybe less likely to turn up on the day as a new person. So think, how are you going to train these people? And training virtually, everybody's used to it now. If possible, that might be the way to go. But I'm sure you guys can immediately think of other ways that you might be able to train, especially if some of the volunteer roles you have, you can't physically do that online. I'm thinking of some of the ones that involve equipment or holding, for example. So we're going to have a wee chat again. We break out into our breakout rooms again and just think a bit more about how we're going to recruit and rebuild the event workforce. Do you have different ideas of where you can source new people? Thinking of any of your roles, how do you think you might word those adverts to attract people rather than just being quite simple, I need this? And if anybody's tried things in the past that maybe have worked or not worked the way you thought they would, share those as well. What would you do differently to recruit volunteers? So we'll do the same thing, break into our rooms for 10 minutes, and if one person could feed back a few of those ideas with the group, that would be great. Okay. Another room first. Who's going to be voluntold that they're sharing? Oh, hi, Julian. Oh, I'll pick on somebody.
I think Carol was voluntold. She might just not realise she was in the other room.
Yeah, I was voluntold. So yeah, we were kind of talking about potentially like Tom uses kind of like corporate volunteers, because the volunteers that he's got to use have got to be PVG'd. Was talking about how kind of a lot of what I will need volunteer-wise will depend on the restrictions at the time and the use of the building. So we're trying to, you know, are we going to keep kind of parents out but then have like bubbles of volunteers who will be, you know, for like doing start gates, like that will be the start gate team for this side, and we'll have one at the other side, and that'll be the kind of groups that are working together. We're kind of looking at potential bits of technology that we can maybe use that we wouldn't need kind of, you know, like we would need like a volunteer for like results runner or rider whip and things like that. We're trying to look at kind of what we can use that way instead as well. So yeah.
Anybody from my room want to share? Because both my pens stopped working. I was prepared.
I think from the discussion that Martin and I had, most of our volunteers come from the clubs or the local club network and whatever. And we kind of hadn't really, well, I hadn't really considered going out with to asking for volunteers from a outside place at all. I mean, there was good stuff about that, about bringing new people in, but there was also the worry that because the network of helpers that we've already got tend to know exactly what they're doing, it makes the job so much easier. You don't have to worry about them crossing over the road at the wrong time or any something else that's maybe natural to somebody who knows about cycling events. But if you're taking a volunteer from outside the cycling community, they might not realise exactly what's going on. But yeah, it's kind of opened up. I thought maybe we could do something like that, because the local cycling network, you tend to have the same people doing this, going around all the clubs and helping out the clubs, and the same people doing the stuff. So bringing some new people in is definitely it would be good, because none of us are getting any younger.
Yeah, I think you talked a bit about the balance of getting those new people in that maybe have never seen a cycling race before, and you know, in the future pairing them up with people so that they can really get that the safety if they were marshalling, for example. But then there's maybe some people that would just be able to get up and running and volunteer straight away and have that common sense not to walk over the road when the race is going on or whatever. So yeah, it is a balance. But I will share my screen again. So last bit I wanted to talk about tonight was retention. So you spend a lot of time getting volunteers in place. You do all this planning. Sometimes you end up really last minute and getting those last few people into place. But it's so much effort. So you do want to keep them. You want them to keep coming back each year if you do your event each year, or if you do a series, you want them coming back to help at as many rounds of the series as you can. And we mentioned this in our room when we were doing the breakout rooms. Saying thank you is a very, very simple way to retain people. When people do surveys, when I talk to volunteers out there, a lot of them, all they want is a thank you. They don't want recognition in any other way. They just want you to say thank you. And the feedback as well is that a lot of the events they go to, they don't get a thank you, or at least they don't remember getting a thank you. So it's making it part of your event routine is how are you going to make sure you say thank you to everybody. On a normal year, it might be, and depending on your discipline, that you can walk around and you can say thank you to the marshals as you go around. You can visit sign on and say thank you. And then after the event, you can send that group email out thanking everybody for their contribution. But it's not just a simple thank you, generic thank you. You want to say, for me, the thank yous that have had the most impact to me when I volunteered are the ones that have come back and said, thank you so much for helping on this event today. You helped 150 people do this sport today. And without you standing on that corner, you know, that wouldn't have been able to happen. So thank you for enabling our sport to continue. So again, going back to those warm and fuzzies and making your event stand out from others, making them feel a part of something is going to help you retain them for the future. Get their feedback. This also helps people feel involved. You might get quite trivial feedback about, oh, my cup of tea was lukewarm when I got it on my break, but you might get something really valuable. And even if it is pretty simple feedback, it does help them feel involved and included in the process and help them feel important. All of that, again, is making them feel part of the team, part of the community, and feeling valued. And the last thing was just keeping future opportunities on their radar. If you only run one event a year, it might be that you want to share the other local clubs and say, oh yeah, in a month's time, the club down the road is also doing a time trial. So you might want to join in there because you did a great job today. Or it might be like, yeah, my next one in the youth series is 2 weeks on Wednesday. Why don't you come along and you can see how sign-on works? Or if it's just a generic email, you could even just copy the Scottish Cycling Events page and say, look in here, if you type in your postcode and how far you're willing to travel, you'll get a list of events that are local, and you can contact the organisers and see if they can have, if they need help, and say that you've had experience at our event. You want to keep them involved in cycling. You want to keep them involved in our events, and you want to give them a really positive experience, because it's like customer service. It's like retail. If somebody has a good experience, they'll share that with other people. But if they have a bad experience, then that will be shared even further. So the important thing is keeping them feel included and valued. And even if they don't continue to volunteer, hopefully they'll share their positive experience with other people. And you never know, their Uncle Billy might come and volunteer the next time, or their best mate Sheila might come along and volunteer. So it may seem like a small thing, but making them feel valued in that way can only be a good thing for your events. So that's us for tonight. Thank you very much for joining me for this session, and I hope you can join us at future sessions. This is the last one of the planned event organizer ones that we've got on, but Martin mentioned in our breakout room, we're doing some return to racing discipline specific sessions starting on the 26th. They're more going to be aimed at organisers, but you're absolutely welcome to come along and share your ideas, hear what they're thinking and what they're worried about when it comes to the different events. I'm all for the organisers and commissaires joining up their thinking, so please do come along. And if you have any suggestions for any other sessions you'd like to hear, please do let us know, because I'm here to deliver things for you that you think will be helpful and help advance your event. So absolutely share those.
Hello.